Oh, hello there. In some ways, it's more difficult to make rapid progress in English than in other fact-based subjects. Of course, you can learn about literary devices which you can insert into your writing, and these can be very effective. But it is also important to read as much as you can, which takes time and requires a good number of months before the effects on your own writing can be seen. Well, this video aims to do both of these things, but within a much shorter time period. Firstly, I will explore and give you the opportunity to reflect on selected sentences and short paragraphs from Kingsley Amis's hilarious 1954 novel, Lucky Jim, which I read for the first time a week or so ago. Why? Why can reading sections from a classic novel what can this have to do with achieving an A star or a 9 for descriptive and narrative writing? Well, the answer to this partly lies in common sense. What better way to increase your chances of producing outstanding writing than by reading outstanding writing? But also in the mark schemes. The CIE IGCSE English Language mark scheme asks for the content to be complex, engaging and realistic. Great literature is invariably complex, engaging and realistic, and by reflecting on such we can steal ideas and possibly the occasional word or phrase to use ourselves. But above all, I want this guide to offer practical advice and tips. And so after some time exploring what makes certain sentences and paragraphs in Amis's work particularly effective, I will give you the opportunity to write your own sentences using similar techniques and ideas. These can then be saved and reproduced in longer pieces of writing, or, dare I say it, your exam. In the third section, I will share 4 sample questions, 2 descriptive and 2 narrative, before talking you through the mark schemes and providing a sample plan for one of them. I will argue that without planning, it is impossible to gain the highest marks in the section of the mark scheme relating to content and structure, however well you write. Following the discussion of the mark scheme and planning, my suggestion is that you then pause this video and spend up to 60 minutes writing your own descriptive narrative response on one of the questions on screen. Pressing play subsequently will show you my own response to one of the questions, which will be analysed in relation to the mark scheme in the final section of the video. So, this is an IGCSE English Language revision video containing what I hope are genuinely useful tips and ideas for achieving an A star or a 9 for the descriptive narrative writing components of your examination. Stay tuned. This is Schofield on Shakespeare. Each section has colour-coded headers to help you return and revisit particularly useful sections. Exploring outstanding writing is light blue, single sentence practice green, exam questions orange, model answer grey, and the analysis of the model answer in relation to the mark scheme is dark blue. Bertrand's jaws snatched successfully at a piece of food which had been within an ace of eluding them. He went on chewing for a moment, pondering. I really like the close, focused detail about the way this character eats. Rather than he ate or chewed ravenously, the writer makes Bertrand's jaws the subject, thus making them seem more powerful and predatory. I also like the idea of a battle between the jaws and the food, as implied in the phrase, which had been within an ace of eluding them. But crucially, these sentences reinforce the idea we have already got of this character within the novel as a whole, that he is ruthless, rather unpleasant, and only after what he can get for himself. I don't know what we should do without someone like him to keep things going. This remark, in itself virtually unanswerable, had the effect, familiar to Margaret's acquaintances, of dumbfounding its audience by the obviousness of its intention, namely the intention of forcing them to talk. Notice that the dictionary definition for dumbfounded has appeared on screen. This is not because I don't know what it means, I do. But actually, I look up multiple words every day in a dictionary in order to develop a more precise understanding of meaning. And actually, when we look at the mark schemes for GCSE writing, that's what they're interested in: precision rather than complexity for its own sake. But back to the extract on screen. This is a situation we can all empathise with. A conversation has run dry, and so someone tries to keep it going. What I love about this moment is the fact that Margaret's intention to keep the conversation going has the opposite effect, and instead stuns everyone into silence. I also like the way the writer says that the audience are dumbfounded, which suggests their silence rather than states it explicitly. When he came back, she was still sitting on the bed, but had evidently put on some lipstick for him. This pleased him more from the implied compliment than from the actual effects. It is often the small, subtle details which catch our attention within writing. Although these two sentences are apparently just about a woman putting lipstick on and the man's feelings about this, the writer also indirectly makes it clear that the man does not find the woman attractive. I like the concise phrasing. No words are wasted when the protagonist describes being pleased more from the implied compliment than from the actual effect. This is a good point to bear in mind within your own writing. Don't use 20 words when 10 words will do. Consciousness was upon him before he could get out of the way. Not for him the slow, gracious wandering from the halls of sleep, but a summary, forcible ejection. He lay sprawled, too wicked to move, spewed up like a broken spider crab on the tarry shingle of the morning. The IGCSE mark schemes look for varied sentence structures. So, as well as ensuring you use a range of simple, compound and complex sentences, think about how you begin each sentence. If most sentences begin with the, or she, or a, think why is this happening and whether it is effective. Here, the positioning of consciousness as the subject emphasises the protagonist's lack of control. Quite fittingly, as the previous night's shenanigans involved an astonishing amount of alcohol and various cringeworthy indiscretions. Note also the hilarious contrast between the civilised, slow, gracious wandering from the halls of sleep. The metaphor halls of sleep makes it seem grand and elegant, and the brutal, abrupt reality, a summary, forcible ejection. I previously mentioned the value of getting into the habit of using a dictionary as much as possible. Well, I learned something new when looking up summary. To my eternal shame, I thought that summary could only be a noun, meaning a short, clear description that gives the main facts about something. But no, it can also be used as a verb. Similes. So many bad, cliched ones out there, often involving animals. E.g., she ran as fast as a cheetah, or he was as strong as a lion. Actually, it takes a great deal of time and thought to come up with similes that are vivid and genuinely work. The descriptive titles in the examination are generally very broad, aimed at giving the candidate the opportunity to show how well they can write rather than catch them out. Therefore, why not take the time to devise and learn some genuinely interesting original similes that you could use to set the scene or describe the weather? The simile on screen now is a rare case, in my experience, of a comparison with an animal that works. Our protagonist has had a wretched night's sleep following extraordinary intake of alcohol. The simile emphasises how his body is contorted in incredibly uncomfortable, unnatural positions, whilst the verb spewed also emphasises the fact that he is highly likely to vomit. Endangering his chance of survival, he sat up a little, and what met his bursting eyes roused to a frenzy the timpanist in his head. Imagery once again. Rather than saying our narrator has an appalling headache, he uses a much stronger metaphor. He has a timpanist in his head, which emphasises the force of the throbs and bangs of his hangover. Footsteps walked the floor above his head, semicolon. Others descended the stairs and entered the breakfast room, semicolon. Still others came from the back of the house and also entered the breakfast room, semicolon. Far off a vacuum cleaner whined, semicolon. A cistern flushed, semicolon. A door banged, a semicolon. A voice called. Semicolons. You must use at least one of these within your descriptive or narrative writing piece and use it accurately. My preference is for the semicolon to create a link between two or more main clauses, i.e. clauses that have a subject and a main verb and make sense on their own. Now, Amis actually uses 7 main clauses and 6 semicolons, which I would argue is probably too much for an IGCSE piece. But of course it has the effect of presenting all kinds of sounds occurring at the same or very similar times within a large house. The header has changed colour from light blue to green, which means that we must have moved on to the next section. From enjoying Amis's prose, let's now do some practical work, firstly on starting sentences in different ways. In the first 2 questions below, the subject of the sentence is a part of a body rather than its owner. In the third question, you get the opportunity to write a far more interesting version of "he fell asleep." Have a go now at copying out and completing all the sentences on screen. Press pause now. I've also had a cheeky go, and note that each question is an opportunity to show off how well I can write rather than gap fill. In sentence 1, I have introduced a contrast between the evidently extremely hungry jaws and the inadequate plate of food available. In sentence 2, there is also disappointment, and as an aside, don't you find that stories with disillusionment and moments of unhappiness are invariably more interesting to read than their happier counterparts? Finally, in the third sentence, there is a cynical reference made to the state of the protagonist's marriage. Rather than sleep offering rest and renewal, actually, it merely gets in the way of arguing. Now let's think about the use of contrast. We have previously talked about the contrast between the slow, gracious wandering and the summary, forcible ejection. I have written 2 further sentences which contrast beautiful appearance and ugly spots, and war and peace. Your turn. Copy out and complete all the sentences on screen. Press pause now. Do you agree with my sentiments about the Big Mac and indeed McDonald's in general? It looks so good on the adverts. And indeed, one of my pupils recently told me that they use mashed potato in the adverts for their ice cream. No idea whether that is true or not. But it does disappoint in reality. I therefore contrast plump, juicy, mouth-watering, etc. with a heartbreaking amalgamation of plastic-coated cheese, as well as a cynical suggestion about the meat content. Sentence 4 is shorter, with joyful semiquavers contrasting to an annoying sound we can all identify with, the whining drone of a vacuum cleaner. Similes and metaphors practice now. Amis's broken spider crab and orchestra member work brilliantly. Have a go now at writing some similarly effective sentences. Press pause. I'm not wild about my first simile. She lay there motionless, curled up like a hibernating hedgehog.
but at least the shape of the curling does reflect the circular curled up shape of a hedgehog, whilst hibernating emphasises the woman's lack of motion. In sentence 2, I've extended the idea of the banging headache by giving the timpanist license to bash and bang to his heart's content. Goodness, just thinking about this makes my head cringe. Note in sentence 3 the use of sibilants, the repetition of the s and sh sounds, which captures the sh silence so abruptly broken by the landlord. Semicolons, used accurately. Use the sentence openers on screen to practice this. Press pause now. Notice how short the clause is after the semicolon in sentence 1. This is needed to reflect the silence, which is enabled by the full stop. In sentence 2, both sides of the semicolon contain personification to create a slightly eerie setting and mood. There is also an iambic feel to the sentence. Iambic is the da-dum, da-dum, da-dum rhythm, and this fits in with the regular rhythm implied by the verb dancing. In question 3, the semicolon helps link 3 sounds occurring in different parts of the same house at very similar times. Let's now look at some exam questions. For the CIE IGCSE English Language 0627 examination, you need to write 350 to 450 words on one question from a choice of 4. The sample paper gave these 2 descriptive questions. You find a photograph which reminds you of someone or somewhere you used to know. Describe what you see, feel and remember as you look at the image. And write a description using the title, The View from the Top. The narrative questions were: write a story or part of a story beginning with the words "something had changed this time," and write a story or part of a story that involves an argument or misunderstanding between friends. I suspect most of you will know where your strengths are and whether you feel you are better at narrative or descriptive writing. If you are good at setting the scene and using descriptive devices such as similes, metaphors, personification, the 5 senses, and using small details, then I suspect it is easier and more formulaic to go for the descriptive question. Obviously, more thought needs to go into devising a plot, albeit it should be a simple one for the narrative writing. Some of you may decide what to do depending on which questions come up. Anyway, for CIE, the marking is split into 2 sections. Content and structure is out of 16. The top band looks for the content to be complex, engaging and realistic. So please, no guns, no chases, no prison breaks. My heart sinks whenever I read a story that contains these things, and the pupil's mark duly plummets with it. Also note that the structure needs to be carefully managed for deliberate effect. So you need to write a plan beforehand so that the structure is a little more than a simple chronological tale or description. Style and accuracy is out of 24, and these descriptors will be very, very similar for all IGCSE and GCSE exam boards. Essentially, this is how accurately and well you write. Here's my own plan for question 3, the descriptive piece about the view from the top. It doesn't matter whether you stick exactly to the plan, and indeed I don't, but this act will ensure that your paragraphs and structure are more likely to meet the criteria about being managed for deliberate effect. Note here how I aim to use different paragraphs to alter the focus of the description. Paragraph 1 is a long shot, whereas paragraph 2 is going to shift suddenly to extreme close-ups, rather like within a film. Notice also how I use a different colour to plan literary devices I can use within each paragraph. Because of course, the plot and content is one thing, but actually what is more important is how well you write. Your turn, dedicated students. Grab a pen and spend 10 minutes or so planning a response to one of the questions on screen, and up to 50 minutes writing it. Do remember everything we've discussed so far in this video, You might even like to incorporate some of the individual sentences from the second part. Press pause now. Here's my response. Question 3. Write a description using the title, The View from the Top. You scrunch your eyes up. Refocus. You tilt your head forward and your pupils dilate. Your eyes skim and scan, squinting at the hive of bodies below. Their motion is scarcely perceptible, but you glean purpose and energy. Most are clad in white, with a few in turquoise green. 4, 5, 6, 7 workers buzz about, with just one lying down motionless. The work appears to centre on this passive one. All is for her. A droplet trickles down the taut neck of one worker. The room feels peculiarly hot for a spring morning. Outside, flowers, plants and trees are showing pleasing signs of renewal. The odd white bud, sprinklings of leaves on upper branches, and the loss of monochrome. Inside, shoulders stiffen, and owners hear their heart rates. Ba-bump, ba-bump. A biro pirouettes out of a clammy palm and lands on the floor with a gentle click. Do remain seated, Mr. Carberry. Yes, I do know. Yes, I am aware. And no, this isn't something... Your patience is very much appreciated. A fluorescent strip light casts the room with clinical white. On a computer monitor, a green line moves spiritedly to the right, rising and falling, sketching sudden peaks and gradual troughs. Plastic off-white curtains cordon off half the room, whilst the arm of a spotlight tilts forward. Multiple leads snake around the area to the right of the bed, whilst a metallic trolley on wheels stands expectantly. Voices reassure. The regular beep from machinery sounds. A door slams outside. Reassuring becomes encouraging. Groans and cries of pain persist. Beep, beep, ba-bump, ba-bump, ba-bump. Moans, whispers, sobs. Encouraging becomes urging. And then, a moment. It is as if time has stood still. Let us capture this moment. The white coats have now straightened up. The passive one now leans back, panting, and all eyes are on a tiny, wiggling, bloody mass of greasy white, spewing life-affirming wails. You smile above at your miracle of creation. Its pain has already been forgotten, to be replaced by the joy of new birth.
What was I trying to achieve with this piece of writing? Well, in the beginning, I wanted to build up interest by not stating explicitly the name of the place being described. I wanted the reader to work it out for themselves, and thus the aim was to build up a degree of tension. Where are we? The reader realises at the end that we are in a delivery room and a baby has just been born. But there are clues all the way through which will signpost the more astute reader, and I will explore these in a moment. So how does this piece achieve full marks? Let's go through different sections of the mark scheme.
The content needs to be complex. Well, the first paragraph is complex in that it doesn't state exactly where you are and starts immediately and arrestingly with you scrunch your eyes up, refocus. There is also some complex but carefully chosen vocabulary in words such as perceptive and glean. The constituent parts of the piece need to be well balanced. One way I do this is by using a second person narrative, you, for the first and final paragraphs only, using third person narrative in the rest. This creates a sense of circular finality when the second person resurfaces in paragraph 7. The constituent parts need to be managed for deliberate effect. Well, it is clear that I have carefully planned the ending, the revelation that we are in a delivery ward and a baby has been born, by the clues shown on screen. Most are clad in white because they are doctors, nurses, whereas the pregnant mother and her partner are wearing green surgical gowns. The reference to nature's rebirth and renewal reflects the human birth that is about to take place, whilst the onomatopoeic description of the heart rate, ba-bump, looks on the page incredibly similar to the words baby bump. Notice also the adjective clinical used to describe the bright light, another hint that we are inside a hospital. Descriptive writing needs developed ideas and images. In this section, I do not mention any human beings at all and instead describe the room in detail. The strip lighting, the heart rate monitor, the curtain, the spotlight, the massive leads, and the trolley ready for the baby. Descriptive writing needs varieties of focus. Well, I devised the idea of cinematic long shots versus close-ups within my plan, and you can see the varieties of focus on screen by comparing the scarcely perceptible motion of doctors, nurses and midwives in the distance with the droplet of sweat in paragraph 2. Turning now to the style and accuracy components of the mark scheme. Candidates getting the highest marks need to have a highly effective style and consistent sense of audience. It is more difficult to pinpoint style. To some extent, I feel it means the writing flows, word choices do not jar. Certainly, the first paragraph on screen uses anadiplosis stylistically. Anadiplosis is where you use the last word of a phrase at the beginning of the next, and so here we see the increasing urgency of the medical staff as they encourage the woman to push. Firstly, they reassure, then reassuring becomes encouraging, then encouraging becomes urging. Notice also how on the second paragraph shown on screen, paragraph 6, the writer has the control and poise to directly address the audience and slow down the moment when the child is actually born. Let us capture this moment, he writes. Vocabulary needs to be precise and well chosen, rather than complex for the sake of it. Here I would pick out the precise verbs used to describe the movement of the eyes and head. The eyes scrunch, skim, scam and squint as they try to look down below on what is happening within the delivery room. Notice also the use of the word taut to describe the tension within the neck of one of the members of staff. Rather than write, one junior midwife felt tense, this was his first delivery, we have a droplet trickles down the taut neck of one worker. We've previously discussed variation in sentence structures. Let's analyse the 3 sentences on screen. The first one, complex but short, with a pause provided by the colon to reflect the significance of the moment being described. The second sentence is simple and once again short. The third sentence is complex and much longer, aptly so as there is so much to fit in. The medical staff straightening up and beginning to relax, the mother lying back in happy exhaustion, and then at the end of the sentence, the vivid description of the baby. And then finally, accurate spelling, punctuation and grammar. No irritating commas in place of full stops, no filthy apostrophe errors, no confusion about whether to use an apostrophe within its or not. On screen the spelling is accurate, including the double S within reassure, whilst I show that I can use semicolons accurately to link main clauses and add variety and poise to my writing.
We've come to the end, dear viewers and subscribers. How can we possibly sum up so many things? Well, in order to achieve an A star or a 9 for descriptive narrative writing, you need to plan your writing. Use a variety of sentence structures. Think about precise, interesting vocabulary. Use a range of punctuation accurately. Build up tension, interest. Suggest rather than patronisingly tell us. Oh, and one other thing. Read. The more you expose your mind to the joy of accurate, intelligent, well-written prose, the better you will write. I promise. This has been a Schofield on Shakespeare production, providing invaluable tips on how to achieve an A star or a 9 for descriptive narrative writing. Many thanks for watching.